It's a real pleasure to introduce Deirdre McLaughlin. Deirdre is going to share her presentation. It's called Awkward, Expensive and Dangerous, My Journey to Sexual Self-Expression. Big round of applause for Deirdre.
Thank you. Can I just say how glad I am that this is almost over and I can go back to watching Netflix again? It was a few months ago that I was out for breakfast with a group of friends. They're over there right now. And Alon said that he was going to be giving a talk on vulnerability with a group of guys. And he asked me if I wanted to be a part of it. I didn't know anything else about it except for what Jeremy was talking about, and I said yes, I'm in right away. I didn't know Jeremy at the time. I didn't know Nate either, although I'm so glad to know them now. But as a counselor and a sexual health educator, I knew that Jeremy's story would help so many people, and I wanted to be a part of that. So, as you can see, the title of my talk is Awkward, Expensive and Dangerous, My Journey to Sexual Self-Esteem, and as I was contemplating what to say, I was like, was it my journey that was awkward, expensive, and dangerous? Or was it me? And it was both. As you'll soon learn, I was somewhat of a master of disaster on this journey. So, I was drawn by the picture of the girl with heart balloons when I was creating the slide. It spoke to my romantic heart that I've always had. When I was in grade 12, a teacher asked the class, who here is a romantic? And everyone in the class said, Deirdre. I didn't know that other people saw me that way, but it was true then and it is true now, and it's relevant to the story. Unwittingly also, I recreated an image of the Fool from the tarot deck, the girl standing at the edge of a cliff and an animal familiar looking nervous nearby. Now, when I raise my hand like this, it's because Alistair up there is gonna switch a slide for me. So, yeah. Yeah, thank you. For those of you that don't know the tarot, this is what it looks like, the Fool, in a few different decks. It's always a person or something standing on the edge of a precipice about to fall over, and there's an animal that's trying to warn the person. And it's called the Fool because they seem to be unaware of the dangers that lay before them, even though there's an animal that's trying to warn them. But the Fool is the first card of the major arcana of the tarot, and it tells the story of a journey. It's the beginning of the hero's journey, and perhaps that's how we all begin our journeys, ignorant and unaware as a fool. For if we knew the dangers that lay ahead, we might never embark, and thereby we'd miss the calling to become the heroes of our own lives. So my own sexual journey began on the second floor of the childhood home of my first love, my high school sweetheart. I had my sexual debut in his rec room upstairs. And to get to his rec room, you had to walk down a hallway. And on the wall in the hallway, there was a picture of the Sacred Heart of Jesus. If you're raised Catholic, it's a familiar image. It's bloody and gory. I was raised Irish Catholic. It was a double whammy. And my boyfriend had the hat trick. He was raised Irish Catholic, and his parents were from the north of Ireland, which was a war-torn place at the time, primarily Protestant. It was dangerous to be Catholic in the north of Ireland at the time, and his parents immigrated to Canada with 5 children in order to escape the violence. That's the kind of house where you'll find the picture of the Sacred Heart of Jesus. And the point that's relevant to this story is that it made a powerful imprint on me in my emerging sexuality. There's a theme in Catholicism of guilt and shame, particularly as it pertains to sexuality. And in spite of all of that, it was actually a good experience. We were in love, we planned it, we wore a condom. We stayed together for a couple years. We broke up, as first loves usually do. And a few years later, I met another boy, young man, from the same Catholic boys' school, this time a Newfie Catholic. And when I became pregnant at the age of 24, his parents descended on him, my parents descended on him, and they said, now's the time you do the thing. You marry this person that's carrying your child, and you become a man. And that's another theme in Catholicism, is obligation. I invented a word, obligilt, to combine the themes. Someone's Catholic in the house. And so we did that thing. We knelt down at a full Catholic Mass, the altar, still in my awkward phase, and we tied the knot. I went to an all-girls Catholic school, and we learned many things. Comprehensive sexual health education was not among them. But I did learn implicitly how to be a good wife. We didn't have a mechanic shop in my high school, if you know what I mean. There was home ec class, where we learned how to cook and sew. And I didn't just learn that at school, I also learned that from my family of origin. In one way or another, all the women in my family were groomed to be good wives. My grandmother was a socialite, and from her I learned to be witty, entertaining, intelligent but not too intelligent on a number of topics, and most of all, a good support to a husband. So the marriage was a good one. We were in love. We were best friends. We'd been together for a few years. But I wasn't prepared for what happened after I tied the knot, which was centuries of expectation descended on me of what that role meant to be a wife, culturally, politically, religiously, historically. And I felt crushed by those expectations. Drugs were never really my drug of choice, but I empathized with the plight of the 1950s housewife, the gin in her laundry basket, the pills that she called mother's little helper. When I was a young wife and mother, my brother-in-law said, at least Deirdre won't need to worry about people looking at her anymore. And at 25, to hear that was a devastating blow. To contemplate being invisible for the rest of my life felt like a death sentence, to be a supporting role in somebody else's life. So at the age of 27, when someone did look at me and transgress the usual barriers that keep a married woman safe from flirtation, I went for it. I had a moment outside my marriage that ultimately became the straw that broke my marriage's back. At the time, I turned to literature to understand my place in the world. That's what I'd always done. I wanted to know what happened to a woman like me. What happens to a woman that steps outside the narrow sexual confines that are laid out for her? And in one novel after another, I learned that women like me die. It's as though society or the male authors didn't know what to do with a sexual woman, and so they killed her off. This was the expensive phase of my journey, because divorce is expensive. Lying to my best friend and my husband for a year out of fear was expensive. Telling him the truth and hurting him was expensive. But what was even more expensive than all of those things was not stepping into my own truth. And ultimately, it was a price that I was unwilling to pay. So, what did I learn from my awkward and expensive phases of the journey? Oh, I forgot one thing, which is this quote by Rhett Butler in Gone with the Wind. He said, until you have lost your reputation, you never realize what a burden it was or what freedom really is. Thank you. Didn't feel that good at the time. But when I was young, I didn't understand why actors wanted to play the wicked roles. I was always compelled by the virtuous characters. But virtue, when it's tied to people-pleasing, is somewhat one-dimensional. And my true self was more complex than that. It had contradictions and nuances and layers and depth. So now we can get to the lessons. What I learned from my awkward phase was to own your truth. Mine was inconvenient and difficult, and it hurt people, and it was painful. But ultimately, your truth is what people need from you. It's your unique offering in the world. And from my expensive phase, I learned to rewrite the narrative. In my case, it was literal. Literature had laid out this very disempowering and limited narrative for me. And so I had to rewrite it myself. But rest assured, if you find yourself having to do that, you're going to pave the way for others that come after you. So, at the age of 30, I was on the fast track, married and divorced already, and on the dating scene for pretty much the first time in my adult life. At the time, my mom said to me, just go have lots of sex. And while I appreciated her attempt at sex positivity, she couldn't teach me what she didn't know herself. She'd raised me as a single mom. She'd never dated while I was growing up, and before that, she had been taught by nuns. So when she advised me to just go have lots of sex, there was no mention of any of the other aspects of sexual health, like relationship boundaries or understanding consent or negotiating condom use. She couldn't teach me what she didn't know. She was ignorant and undereducated in those areas, and by extension, so was I. And ignorant and undereducated is a very dangerous way to enter onto the sexual scene. How did that look in real life for me? Well, the romantic that I'd always been, you know, if someone said to me that they were crazy about me and couldn't live without me, I thought that was romantic. I didn't have the critical lens at the time to think, is it healthy that they're crazy about me? Do they know me well enough to be crazy about me? And what are the implications if they really can't live without me? And consent, I'd like to say that I understood the broader brushstrokes of that, the more obvious, no means no, yes means yes, but if I'm really being honest, I don't even think I held that line. I know I didn't hold that line. But the nuances of consent, where many of our sexual lives reside, I didn't understand that at all. And so knowing what I know now, I can say that I wasn't always having consensual sex. And condom use, well, I'd hardly used one since high school. Hello, pregnancy at 24. I didn't really know how to put one on. And beyond that, I'd never learned a script for how to navigate that in an intimate moment. It seemed awkward and uncomfortable. And so, because it seemed awkward and uncomfortable, I just didn't do it. Which made every trip to an STI clinic an absolute terror, overlaid with my Catholic guilt and shame that had me believing that STIs were dirty, and if you have one, if I had one, so was I. Now, knowing what I know chlamydia, for example, is just the common cold of the genitals. You take a round of antibiotics and you're good to go. It's true. Get tested. But at the time, it would have been a source of deep shame for me. So all this time, I was looking for true love, and things were blowing up in my face again and again. And discouraged, defeated, humiliated, I said to my mom at one point, I'm beginning to see how you made the choice to be alone for the rest of your life. I thought that that was maybe the only sane decision to make. And she said something to me at the time that I'll never forget. She said, Deirdre, I made that choice because my trust had been shattered, and I should have sought counseling for that. Those were the right words at the right time to give me the courage to keep my heart open, keep looking for the love that I believed was possible. So around 6 years ago, shortly before I met a wonderful man that I'm with today, Rye Guy, as I call him, he's in the audience, and so is my ex-husband, and I want to give a shout out to both of them for being so supportive. Yeah, and being such good sports. I got so codependent while I was making this. I was like, am I okay? Are you okay? Is everybody okay? So shortly before I met my guy, I was pulling a card from my tarot deck a lot. I have a deck called the Lover's Path. In most decks, this one's called the World. In my deck, it's called Triumph. And it's the last card of the major arcana, the journey that begins with the Fool. This is the completion of it. And there's no downside to this card. It's all joy. It's success, it's fulfillment, completion, happiness. In my deck, it tells the story of Ariadne, who was the princess of Crete. And she defied her father and her country for true love. She rescued her lover Theseus from death, and together they eloped to an island where she believed that they would live together happily ever after. But Theseus didn't feel the same way about her. And while she slept, one night, he stole away from the island, and she woke up abandoned, confused, and humiliated and alone. But in the heavens above, Dionysus, the great god, had been watching her, and he fell in love with her courage and bravery and her willingness to risk everything for love. And through that love, she became immortal. Through the years, I've said to my partner, thank you for making an honest woman out of me. And I don't think he really understands what I mean by that. I think it embarrasses him. And it's a little bit weird to say as a feminist, I don't need saving. I don't need rescuing. But love is redeeming. And all that time that I was trying things out and having one disaster after another that I was the architect of, all that time I was really just looking to love and be loved. And in spite of all evidence to the contrary, I'm actually quite good at it. So, what have I learned at the completion of this journey? And by the way, when you complete a journey, you begin another cycle. And we all become the Fool yet again. That's your mission if you choose to accept it. If you choose to be a student of life. But what did I learn from this cycle? Well, to recap, from my awkward and expensive phases, I learned to own your own truth and rewrite the narrative. And from my dangerous phase, I learned to educate yourself sexually. You need to know your body physically, and you need to know your emotions. Heal your traumas, and heal any myths and superstitions that keep you bound to shame. Learn to take care of yourself so that you can not only take care of yourself, but you can take care of your lovers. Whether you're together for a day or a lifetime, be in integrity and look after each other. I learned to keep your heart open. This is probably more relevant now than ever before. The world needs open-hearted people. So this isn't just about love or matters of the heart or body. This is how you walk through the world. And finally, and this is the sexual health educator in me, last but not least, for God's sakes, use a condom. Thank you so much.